Hey, friends. So today I'm actually going to talk about something that's very, very current for me. It's a question that myself and my wife are looking at um, because pertaining to our daughter, and if you haven't caught my previous posts about this, I've occasionally talked about our daughter doing Montessori, and I have recently done sort of a real preliminary intro course to Montessori philosophy, the ideas behind the pedagogy. And so I've become more and more interested in it. And one of the primary characteristics of the sort of pedagogy as it rolls out over time is that kids have these planes, they call them planes of development. And a plane of development is sort of a period of time during which their mind works in a certain way, and that has all kinds of social emotional implications and implications for optimal ways of learning, obviously also optimal ways of teaching kids at certain ages. So there's this whole understanding of the human being and the unfolding of the human being that really plays into looking at how a child goes through their education, and really, for the first several years of their life, that's their life. How they go through life, how they evolve in life is kind of understood in this deeply researched kind of way. So anyway, the decision we're wrestling with is whether or not our daughter should move up into the next class, which is basically like first grade, this coming year. In other words, a year from now, or a little less than a year from now, next fall, or whether she wants to actually kind of stay in the room she's in, whether it would be preferable to stay in the room she's in and have another year to be in that social emotional environment. Nice thing about Montessori is you can draw elements in terms of the academic work. You can just pull the work that the kid is ready for into whatever classroom they're in. And that's whether they need work that's more advanced or whether they need work that's remedial. They can kind of that element can be adjusted. The grades and the levels, the planes of development, don't dictate the level of academic work that the kid can or cannot have access to. They can have access to pretty much anything, pretty much all the time. The big decision you're making is in terms of their social emotional state of being. Where are they? How are they operating? Whom are they relating to in the classroom? What are the other kids they hang out with? Where are they socially? And what does that all look like? Are they ready to be in the next level? Are they gravitating towards kids who are moving up? Are they gravitating towards kids who are kind of younger than them or whatever? So there's a lot of, it's one of these decisions that feels like, you're making a big decision for your child's life in some ways. And we got feedback from her teachers that was literally like as middle of the road as you could get. In other words, there was they were like, she will do great either way you go. And we were like, well, that's wonderful to hear. And also, that doesn't help us make the decision that we're wrestling with. Although, in some level, I think it kind of can. It can help us in the sense of diffusing any sense that we're likely to get this wrong or to do something incorrect here. And so, interestingly, for all the things that my wife and I have in common, as far as like being the oldest kid in our household, I actually have an older brother from my dad's first marriage, but he didn't grow up in our household, so I kind of grew up as the oldest. Same for my wife. There's a number of just personal traits that we can kind of look back at each other's lives and be like, oh yeah, I get that. I felt the same way at that age, or I struggled with that same thing at that age, or really loved this at that age, or whatever. We have a lot of overlap there. And one big difference is that I was kind of on the older side for my grade level, and she was on the younger side. Almost, not quite exactly split, but pretty much, pretty relatively pronounced. I was on the older side, she was on the younger side. So now we're sort of like deciding which way our daughter's going to go. Is she going to be on the younger side, like for her academic life, or is she going to be on the older side for her academic life? And it's really interesting to look at these things. I've talked this through now a little bit. With mostly my wife and with her teachers. But I think there's an element of this that quickly becomes, it feels like an emotional decision, because you're making choices in some ways about their future. And you hope you're reading the signs correctly. You hope you're looking at you hope that you're taking in the data that they're putting out. And just FYI, I'm not looking to come up with the right answer on this post. That's not gonna probably happen. If you're like thinking about scrolling ahead and just finding out where this goes, you're probably going to be disappointed. But the question, what I'm really trying to do by raising this on my video post, as opposed to in conversations with the relevant people, which is what I've mostly done so far, is to kind of feel whether there are any elements of this that I am having trouble looking at, or that I am somehow, privileging in my perception of things. There's the way in which I think either of these paths has certain advantages and maybe some corresponding disadvantages. But I think maybe that's part of that actually might be the thing. That actually might be why I'm unpacking this, is to sort of see for myself that it's not really advantages and disadvantages. It's not actually about this will be better and this will be worse, or, in a way that you could make a pros and cons column that would spit out the right, clear and prescriptive feedback on what to do. And I actually think that evaluating things in terms of these are the positives and these are the negatives, in some ways, there's plenty of instances in which that's exactly the right way to proceed. But there are some instances, and I think this might be one of them, when that's really not actually an effective approach to deciding or even thinking about the issue. What we got to do is, obviously listen to our intuition. If our intuition is speaking, let that voice be heard. And listen to what the other person is requesting on a deep level. Because on some level, on a very surface level, Annalise is always striving to be a big kid. She's striving to be older. She can't wait to be the next age. When she turns a new age, she, like when she turned 5 recently, she was mildly confused. Like a couple days later, she was like, I don't feel 5. And it was kind of like her way of saying, I don't feel like I have any new superpowers that make me categorically different than I was when I was 4. And I kind of thought I might, because that's how I perceive 5-year-olds or people who are older than me. I perceive them as having powers. So, there's like there's a listening on that level, but then there's a listening on another level of in some ways what I hear through that, if I take a moment to just decode that message. One possible interpretation is that she's saying, I don't want to always be the youngest. Because so far she often has been. In many of both in this classroom, she was one of the very youngest to enter. She would be the very youngest one to enter the next classroom if she moved up. And that desire, that urgency to be one of the big kids is actually something that might be fulfilled by remaining where she is and actually being one of the big kids, one of the older kids in that class. One of the things that really stood out to me in the learning that I did about Montessori pedagogy is that there's a time and a place when kids get to be in the later year, because classes are always like 3 years worth of an age span of about 3 years in each class. So kids that are getting towards the older end of that class, they become the teachers in many instances for the younger kids in the class, and they deliver lessons. They'll teach other kids entire lessons. And that aspect is not simply a service to the kids who are receiving the lessons. That aspect is a service to everyone involved, because those kids who are teaching the lessons are consolidating their knowledge. They're integrating their knowledge. They're learning to communicate what they know. It's deepening their learning, which is something that doesn't really occur in many other forms of pedagogy. You're not the teacher. In a conventional school, the kids don't, it's not that they don't teach each other things. Of course they do, and socially, and they're always interacting and teaching each other things. But there's a place within the formal structure of the classroom for kids to take on that role in Montessori. And I think it's really kind of ingenious, because it harnesses the kind of network effects of having kids at different levels of academic progress, but at the same level of social emotional development, or at a similar enough level that they cross-pollinate really well. And in some ways, when I see that, I think about that third year role, that higher year role, I think to myself, that's really one of the things that my daughter is craving. She's craving being in that leadership role. So what if we make space for that? What if we make a little more space for her to be in that leadership role? Both now in the kind of immediate, in this classroom where she is now, and also in the classrooms that she's going to go to, because she'll be a little bit older in those environments. She won't be the youngest one. She won't be the youngest one in her year every year. Even as a third year, she won't be the youngest third year. She'll be one of the older third years. So and ultimately, I know that, we can't choose this wrong, but there's a way in which coming to this decision from a place of real sensitivity, real listening, is clearly the way to go. So that's what I got today, folks. Big parenting decision on my table. Looking at what that means. Trying to be present, be awake to what's coming through me and my daughter and the family and the whole network of relationships that are involved. So I thought I would share that. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you soon.